and deepen our own wisdom and our own realization in this ever-changing world. So to complain about what's wrong, sometimes we do that, it's a human nature. But there's something so much more that we can gain if instead of complaining, we really try to ask, what am I supposed to learn from this? When am I going to actually take very seriously excavating the great treasures that are within myself? To gain anything great in this world takes challenge. So we're going to be challenged no matter what. Why not balance that to find the greatest treasure? These are some of the thoughts that I spontaneously became inspired to share with all of you this evening. Thank you very much. And Larry, would you like to describe some of the challenges that happened after I left home? If I didn't ask him to speak on this, he may speak about what we did when we lived in our room together. So this is a more transcendental subject. Sit here.
He's sitting there at the side. You good? Can you hear me? He's staying here close by to nudge me in case I cross the line. Because I know some things. Bribery may help. What else you got?
This too.
Cartels. And my brother Richie, do you mind if I call him Richie?
Just call me Swami.
You see? I'm being edited already. When the Swami first returned in 72, which we will speak of in a moment, one of the things that he brought me were brass cartels, because he knew I loved music. And I think he brought me a couple of flutes as well. But I still have those cartels from 1972 that he brought. So they're probably fairly ancient because I assume they were forged way before that as well. Do you remember where you picked up those cartels?
No.
Anyway, he wanted me to speak about when he was away. You've all read The Journey Home? Yes. Raise your hand if you haven't read The Journey Home. Security? Miles, truly? And we'll get a copy before you leave. I know somebody that can make that happen. But anyway, it was very difficult times for us. You know, as I won't get into too much detail because Swami already spoke of our childhood together in a village called Highland Park, and more so in a smaller area of Highland Park called Sherwood Forest, which was as magical as its name may imply. It was a very lovely place to grow up, a lot of mature trees everywhere, winding streets, We had a modest little home which still stands today, and also in which we are very fortunate to be able to go back to that very home and hang out. It's amazing. Some of you here, some of our dear friends that have come to the States have actually slept in our old bedroom. That's pretty amazing. But Swami decided to take his journey in 1970. And that's the same year that we sold the house shortly after he left. And we moved to Miami Beach, Florida. And we didn't hear from him for I think we heard from you a few times when you were, in England and Italy. You were busking on the streets with Gary and living the bohemian lifestyle on your journey. And then all of a sudden the letters stopped, the phone calls stopped. I knew what he was up to in my heart. I knew what he was seeking because we both shared that journey to a certain degree before he left. We shared in a lot of meditation together and different things of that sort. But my parents didn't quite understand what he was doing. Although my father, throughout his life, went out of his way to understand his children. And when Swami and I were in his basement lair doing transcendental meditation, my father wanted to know what it was all about, and he decided to get initiated into transcendental meditation. So he took his little bit of fruit and flour and went to this hotel in Evanston where they were initiating, and my father learned how to meditate. So he always pursued ways to understand his kids, sometimes extraordinary ways. But he couldn't understand why his son wasn't writing. And we were all worried. I was worried as well, not quite as much as my parents, because I had faith that he was following some path and eventually things would turn out okay and he'd come home. But months went by, and then we got this letter. I don't know if it was the letter from Tehran, Iran. I think it was after you actually arrived in India. And it was a very cryptic letter in flowery language that we didn't understand. I think perhaps you were about to maybe fly somewhere, and I am about to embark on a great iron bird to sail above the clouds. Things of this nature. And much reference to Krishna and devoting oneself to that, higher power, whatever. I kind of sort of read through the lines and understood. My parents didn't have a clue. But the periods of time that we didn't hear from my brother was very rough on them. I saw my father age because he was such a devoted father. And Swami will attest, when we were growing up, if we weren't home at 6 o'clock for dinner, they'd start making phone calls. Where's our son? Where's our son? If we stayed out beyond curfew, they'd start worrying. If we stayed over at a friend's house without telling them, forget about it. They'd be freaking out. So they were always worriers, especially my father. So he was freaking out. Whatever hair he had, I think he lost. Which wasn't a lot, but nevertheless. And I saw him age more rapidly than I thought he should be aging. And somehow I got an address for you, and I wrote you a few letters, I think you might still have them, pleading you to come home, or at least let us know what's going on, because Father is not taking this well. So by and by, time passed, and he started to get back in touch. And by this time, as I said, we had sold the house. We were living in Florida in an apartment about 2 blocks from the Atlantic Ocean. It was quite pleasant. And the Swami finally came back to the States. And I was there at the airport. And we were waiting and waiting. And finally, he came out of the gate. And at that time, he wasn't shaving his head. He had long hair. He was unshaven. He was wearing what he's wearing now, but it was very tattered and degraded. And the only possessions he had was, I think, the Bhagavad Gita in a bag and a wooden bowl, which we still have, that he used to eat out of. So we're standing in the Miami airport, and here comes this, he looked like some disheveled sadhu that came straight down from the mountains. But we embraced him. We were just so grateful that he was back with his family. And we lived on the terrace for a while because he didn't like being inside. I hung out with you all the time out there. I learned to eat with my fingers out of a bowl. It was good. Those were good times. And somewhere along the way, he learned how to do gourmet vegetarian cooking. And him and my dear mother, who we miss very much, he would give her lessons on how to cook, and they would make these feasts together, and it was quite amazing. But, he was back with his family, but his heart was elsewhere. And in America, there's a very famous song sung by a singer named Tony Bennett. It's called "I Left My Heart in San Francisco." Does anyone know that song? Well, he left his heart in India. He was here, but his heart was back there. So the only thing he could really do was find sanctuary in New Vrindavan. So that's where he went. And as he mentioned, I followed him there, and we had pleasant times on the mountaintop in a very isolated farmhouse. But still, he was still under the mode of renunciation. He wanted to renounce anything material. And at that time, that could have or could not have maybe included his family. So he didn't really, even when he was back in the States, they still worried about him because they didn't hear from him very often. So my father started doing his journeys to New Vrindavan. And where Swami chose to stay, and when I was there also chose to stay with him, was way up high on this mountaintop in this very isolated, quiet farm. And the only way to get up there was at this, it wasn't even a road, it was just a winding dirt path. And my father had to ride in the back of an ox cart to visit my brother. You wouldn't even come down from the mountain, I don't think, the first couple times. He laughs now. So that's how they started to cultivate the deep connection that they have now. You won't find another father-son relationship like they have today. It's amazing. And many of you know Jerry. He's been here 4 times already. And so thank goodness they reconnected. And I never disconnected. But here I am. It's my first time in India, and hello. I just want to keep this brief and just say how grateful I am to be here, to be with my brother in some place other than the United States. And to thank from the bottom of both my wife's and my hearts all the gracious hospitality that has been extended to us in our brief stay. The generosity is overwhelming. And we've joined your family here. And we feel the friends that we made are more than friends, but they're family. And we'll be back. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.